Why
You
do
know,
A players leave?
a lot of reasons, but ultimately, a player by definition will have high expectations of the organization, the same way as we have high expectations of everybody we hire, right? And if there is a disappointment, if the expectations are not met with reality, uh, we have a ticking bomb, right? It just can't last. So very often you're starting with the organization presenting itself as something it is not. You have that very often when you have this charismatic CEO who is a really good salesperson, but not necessarily a great leader, and they can create a impression of culture that people buy into, but they come and the reality is very, very different. In the cart, we're talking about three main reasons, but there are actually quite a few of them. But ultimately, it comes to, are people getting of what they expected? What is it that they sign up for, and how does the reality measure to that?
Welcome back to Cardcast. I'm back with Milan Vaverka. Let's spin the cards and see what we're going to talk about today.
The heart card, I love the heart cards, and it's no pun. I'm always kind of tending towards where our job, coaching, and the subject leadership meets with psychology, right? And it's a lot of the hard cards are about that, and I think this is a great example of it, right? Because when we have great people leaving, when we have what's called regrettable departures, because there is also the other kind, um, it is ultimately to how people feel about where they are at with the job and with the position they're in our organization.
Yeah, and we see many reasons why A players leave, and we'll talk about that in the episode today. But that simple quote that you often hear, people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers. And that's the same for leaders as well. If you're a bad leader, then there's a good chance that the stars in your team will find alternate ways to satisfy what they want, and you lose your A players.
Yeah,
So why
you
do
know,
A
I
players leave?
a lot of reasons, but ultimately, a player by definition will have high expectations of the organization, the same way as we have high expectations of everybody we hire, right? And if there is a disappointment, if the expectations are not met with reality, uh, we have a ticking bomb, right? It just can't last. So very often you're starting with the organization presenting itself as something it is not. You have that very often when you have this charismatic CEO who is a really good salesperson, but not necessarily a great leader, and they can create a impression of culture that people buy into, but they come and the reality is very, very different. In the cart, we're talking about three main reasons, but there are actually quite a few of them. But ultimately, it comes to, are people getting of what they expected? What is it that they sign up for, and how does the reality measure to that?
A players are key to this card, but we should really define what an A player is. So how would you define an A player, Milan?
It's a very, very good question. Like, Shannon on her workshop did a great, great analogy that I've used so many times ever since, which is the idea that, if you imagine being on the trip, A players are the ones ahead of you, just cheering them along. The B players are the one who are walking with you and, steady, and off we go. And then the C players are the ones you have to come back and drag along to actually get you at least to some speed. So they are effectively slowing you down. So
Yeah.
A players are really the guys who are, or gals, who are helping you to get where you need to go. And they're actually adding energy to you. And if all you have to do is to support them, you're a good and happy leader.
Yeah. So A players are high performers who also live the core values most of the time. And we put that 9 by 9 grid up in front of leadership teams that we work with, and they're often very surprised that it's only the top right box that is where the A players are, and then slightly to the left of the B players, but the other 7 boxes are C players. So we are setting a pretty high bar for A players here. And that's because you have to.
We actually had a. Oh, you know what? I won't even go there because that's a different card. Because, you know, I actually have a distinction between the C players into three categories. But you know what? We'll leave that for the ratings card, where I think we are talking about this more specifically.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day. So let's look at these three reasons that A players tend to leave. Lack of vision. What does that mean for you? Because we've already talked about A players have high expectations, and they need something to stretch them. So let's go into the detail there.
Oh, absolutely. Like, they want to join you because it sounds exciting, right? And because they believe that, okay, this is going somewhere and there is a vision. If they join and suddenly they see that that vision is just the veneer or just a marketing tool, but the organization's not actually heading there, right? Or if they see that, ultimately the vision changed three times since they joined 2 months ago, which also happens very often. Again, Barry Conchie said, "Who wants to follow someone who's going nowhere?" Right? Um,
Mhm.
Another great uh, a hero of mine, Dirk Gently, says, if you follow someone who seem like they know where they're going, maybe you don't get where you want to go, but you'll end up where you need to be.
Yeah. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's the holistic detective's approach to it. So
Yeah.
again,
Douglas
the vision
Adams.
is
Yeah. Mhm.
exactly
Mhm.
the vision is very, very important, and its consistency and follow through and realness, like the fact that we can say, hey, this is the vision, but if the company or the organization is not actually making the necessary steps to make it real, the A player will lose interest before you know it.
Yeah. Yeah, they got to feel that there's something in it for them, and it's exciting, it's motivating. So that the purpose, the values, the big hairy audacious goal, there's something there that has to really stretch them. And the thing about A players is, people can be an A player in one organization and a B or a C player in another organization. And that's often because they just not aligned to the core values. There's nothing wrong with that. They're just not their core values. So it's difficult. Finding A players is often a very, very complex process because it's often very, very hard to hire for values. You can hire for capability. That's easy. You can give someone a test or you can give someone an assessment. Actually truly understanding whether someone's values align with the company's, that's a lot harder. And maybe there should be a separate card for that.
Actually, there is.
There you go. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to it on another day. Which is a good reason for people to subscribe, because if you don't want to miss, the other ones that we are referring to, there is a button for that. Anyway, moving on. Do you want to move on to that weights?
I think so. I think so because this is a big one, isn't it? Because A players want to play with A players.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Dead weights and sacred cows.
Hmm.
Such a huge issue in many organizations. Right? I was doing a team assessment, that 9 by 9 grid with a new client this morning, and just that, was such like, why are these people even here to some degree, right? But I'm also working with another client who has difficulties and say, this person has been here for 15 years. I was like, yeah, but look at the damage they're causing to everybody else because of their entitlement, because of the culture is giving them authority based not on merit but only on the fact that they've been here for so long. But the company outgrew them, the needs outgrew them, and the culture evolved beyond them. And if an A player comes into an organization and suddenly they feel like there is a whole bunch of people, or sometimes it's just one, for whom different rules and
Yeah.
different expectations apply, it's so demotivating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a terrible. It's literally like a death knell of the culture of the organization,
Yeah.
because that means that we are trying to keep people to different levels of accountability and performance. And like that old monkey experiment, with a grape and cucumber. I'm sure you've seen it, right? People are absolutely allergic to unfairness.
Yeah.
Like, why should I work this hard? Even though that's it's a player, it's a person who would actually love nothing more than works hard for the right thing. But the demotivation of saying like, but the
Yeah.
cousin of the CEO over here,
Yeah.
or
So
yeah.
what reasons have you seen for leadership teams, CEOs keeping the sacred cows? There's what have you seen in reality in practice?
So very often it's a co-founder who outgrew his value that happens. Very often it's a person who is there for the wrong reason, friend, relative. Like nepotism is such deadly, right? Like if you are the CEO's nephew, you have to work 3 times as hard because you have to prove that you are there on merit, not because of that reason.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
the other one again is when the leadership team or when the leader, not necessarily the CEO, but the leader responsible for that person or that whose organization this person is a people pleaser. They prefer the relationship to the actual performance of the organization. So it becomes a person over the team.
Yeah. 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 And I think I've seen that a few times when there is someone. You use the example of a co-founder. Someone who's been there a long time. Someone who probably feels a little bit entitled to their position and sort of perks in their organization. And when I challenge CEOs, I often hear the response is often, well, I owe them. I owe them. So well, actually, no, you don't. I'm pretty sure you've been paying them for the last 15 years. So you don't owe them at all. You've already discharged that loyalty. And if they're not fulfilling a valid role in the organization, then you've either got to give them another role or you've got to give them their freedom. There's no obligation to continue with someone when they are no longer the right fit for an organization for whatever reason. That's why people get a salary.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you have to be mean to them or that you have to be
Absolutely.
nasty or that
Mhm.
you part way with them. But I've seen several CEOs who were paying people so they had their friends,
Yep.
right? Which, to be perfectly honest, from purely psychological point of view, I understand and I empathize with, because being CEO is freaking lonely, right?
Yeah, it is.
Um,
Mhm.
but it's a trap, right? It's a trap. Like because it's easy for a C player to pretend that they like you, right?
Mhm.
And as soon as you actually start putting right accountabilities into the
Yes.
play, things happen, and often good things. Often when we come in and you start putting metronomics in place, you start putting the accountability mechanism, you get scorecards in place, you start working on reviews. The C players, no matter whatever reason they're for, they do have a very strong tendency to realize eventually that the loyalty itself is not enough and it sucks for them, and they select themselves out, which is then the best for everybody, right?
Yep. They either select themselves out or they realign with the culture of the organization and start moving up towards the top right. And they're only C players because they haven't been told the expectations. They haven't been told the core values. The expectations of what's needed to be right in the organization hasn't been made clear to them. So I often see C players who, okay, that's what you mean. That's what you want. Those are the behavioral expectations. That's fine with me. I didn't know that. And it's often very unfair classing people as C players when the expectations haven't been made super clear.
Yeah. And going back to your 3 by 3, I think that is really, there is a big difference between the upward and the right or direction of
Yeah.
it, right? If we are on the top as far as values go, and again, do we actually have the values? Do we actually live by them? Are they clear?
Yeah.
Are they uh, are they just words on the wall, or are they actual core values of the organization? Right?
Mhm.
Putting all
Mhm.
that aside, once we are on the top, often it's about the expectations of performance that might not be clear. The scorecard is wrong. There
Yep.
might be another really, really good role for that person within that organization where they would thrive and the organization would as well. Now, I am not suggesting to build roles and scorecards around people. What you need to do is to define of what the organization needs and then hire for that, but you can hire internally, right?
Yep.
You say, hey, we really need this role. And John, who was really, really not cutting it, in their current role, would actually be a superstar here because it lines up with whatever. So you would be fool not to fish in that pool as well.
Yep. You choose the most appropriate person for the role.
Yeah, when I come to an organization that has a lot of misalignment like that, I am trying to encourage the leader to look at their current staff, their current team, as the pool from which they hire into the roles as they are newly defining them. It's just a mental switch, it's just a mental exercise. I'm not telling them fire everybody and then start again, but really what you say, define what you need, ignoring what you have, right? And then start pairing of, hey, oh, actually, this would be great for Mark. This would be great for Susan. Like, I can totally imagine them being
Yep.
there, then have the conversation with them. And you might find out that you have more A players than you thought you did.
Yep. Yep. Uh, there's often I mean, just continuing on the conversation around dead weights, there's often a very sudden realization where you're talking to a CEO or a leadership team, and they realize that if they remove some of their C players, two things happen. First of all, they've cut a whole load of cost out of the organization. And secondly, they start to see the organization go faster because they're no longer being held back by the dead weights. And that's is
Nobody ever said,
often, yeah,
yeah, nobody ever said, I wish I kept them for 3 more months, right?
that's right. Yeah, yeah. No CEO ever said that. I wish I delayed that firing decision. Yeah, no one ever said that. So, I mean, dead weights is maybe an unfortunate term, but it does happen. And
Yeah,
it's like leadership. Sometimes you need to make tough decisions, but you do it with you have to do it with dignity.
exactly. And the humanity and empathy and all of those things. But think about it this way. If you are true to your intention of changing the organization, person that we are defining like that is never going to be happy in that organization.
Right. Mhm.
So I do like the term of freeing up somebody's future, right?
Yes.
And again, and you can help them in that future, and you can show your loyalty and potentially friendship if it developed in the way of helping them in what the next step is. But why wouldn't you want them to be somewhere where they can thrive and be happy, right?
Yep. You're liberating them so they can fulfill their own future.
As you're saying, by keeping them because you have the false people pleaser tendency, you're actually doing disservice to the A players and the better ones that in your organization that you already have, and you're just dragging everybody down. End
And
of
you're doing
story.
a disservice to those people as well because you're not
Yep.
making a tough decision that will allow them to liberate. Mhm. Yep. Okay. Is that a good time to move on to the third point?
We
False
better
authority.
this episode is getting a bit longer, so I guess this is a juicy topic. Let's move on.
Yeah,
False
so
authority. What do you read when, or what comes to mind when you read that?
false authority for me is all about disempowerment. It's when someone is in a role and for whatever reason they feel rightly or wrongly that they are no longer empowered to actually achieve the outcome that they have either been asked to achieve or they've set themselves. And this happens insidiously sometimes, where there's not good conversation between a CEO or a leader and the individual, where maybe trust has been lost, and gradually the ability to be successful in the role is gradually pulled away from them, gradually disempowering them from actually being able to achieve the outcome they're looking for. And it's soul destroying. I mean, I've seen it in organizations where for whatever reason, and it's not in functional organizations, in dysfunctional organizations, where gradually people get disempowered. And eventually they're going to say, you know what, I'm done here. I'm done here. You clearly don't want me here. But all of that could have been cut short by probably an expectation conversation early on in that process. But this does happen. Where have you seen it happen, Milan? Because there's a reason why this is a point in this card.
There are so many examples, right? I can't go into too much detail because it would be so hard not to name the people in the companies, and some of them are dear friends that were subject to this. But since I wrote this card, which been a while ago, I think that there are two elements of the dispowerment. One is you were actually never given the authority that we agreed on,
Yep.
right? As in, of course, just get us the lead and you'll get the budget and you'll get the support, and they sign and they show up, and what budget, what support? It's you, make it happen, right? So it's sort of one direction. And the second direction is, or the second dimension of it, if you will, is if they are put into a dysfunctional organization. So, and if their work in their success depends on other pieces, but you don't have the right leaders in those positions, but then somehow, this A player in a role that is not enabled, not just empowered, but enabled to succeed, is the one who sees if you bring the best painter in the world at the end of a delayed construction process, they're going to be late by definition,
Yeah.
well, no matter what they're going to do, right? But they're the ones who are the last ones leaving the house, so they're the one who will be blamed, or they're the ones who will have to deal with the fact that the job is not done on time. And the framers who were 2 weeks late in the beginning and everybody else was trying to catch up ever since, they're long gone on different job. Right? So just and this works in so many different ways, like the usual sales and marketing tension, and so on and so on. I
Yep.
think we could come up with a million examples.
Yeah. This reminds me of a conversation I had just yesterday evening. It's quite ironic, and this isn't a client. This is just someone I know who's in a senior leadership role in an organization, and they were brought in to effect change. Now that's what they
That's
do. That's what they built their career on, and they are very very good at it. I've worked with them before, and the conversation last night went around. Yeah, I just fired myself today. And I said, "Really? What happened?" He said, "Look, been there a while. The rest of the leadership team do not want to change. For whatever they say in the leadership team meetings, they do not want to change. And I was brought in to effect change. And if they don't want to change, then I can't effect the change that I want, that the CEO has tasked me to do. It's just not going to work." So yeah, I fired myself today. So yeah, these things, this happens. This absolutely happens. Now he's an absolute A player. He is an absolute A player, but he has now moved on to another opportunity where an organization can take advantage of his really, really good skill.
when you ask, for example, I had like, it's a mirror story to this one, right? With that added flavor that the leadership team, when they meet, are full of support and saying, "Oh, this is great, let's do that." But as soon as they leave the room, they just slow walk everything because again, the resistance to change is so massive. And I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, right? And we had the uh, unions were basically very strong. They were partially running the country, and the issue was that people were motivated to um, produce or be only productive at a level that improved the gave them the maximum reward, but did not increase the expectations going forward. Right, because if you were like 10% over the expectation, you would get a bonus and it would be good. If you would be 20% over, for example, you would get a bonus, but then the expectations would be 20% higher the next year, right? So it was a really, really balancing game and really just path to mediocrity. And if somebody would come into a team and suddenly they would start performing at a different scale, uh, that was nearly a death sentence, right? Because they were now messing with everybody else's livelihood. And since I left that space, and I live in a very, very different environment.
Sure.
Uh, Psychology works the same way. It's just, even without a different system.
Yeah, yeah. And ultimately, you've got to give people the tools and the ability to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So why do A players leave? Well, the corollary to that is, how to keep A players. And if you set an inspiring vision and you give people the opportunity to be successful, and you give them the opportunity to play with other A players, then they'll probably stay. It's not hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Just be strict, be fair, be honest, and you are on the good way.